Good afternoon, Patriots. This is the American Vision, broadcast on the TLBTV network and brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Bill Muckler, and I'm coming to you from my home studio in Cocoa, Florida, on America's beautiful Space Coast. And today I've got a special guest. I have Stanley Victor Paskavich. And Stanley is, I should say Stan, we've known each other for quite some time and talked so many times. Stan's the author of a book called The Survivor's Guide to Self-Execution, and he's also a poet, and he's an Air Force veteran of 12 years, I believe. So Stan, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got, where you're from and where you got started and how you got into the service.
Starting at birth, I was born at Centralia, Illinois, and in St. Mary's Hospital, and I grew up in a small town called Junction City, but we called it Glen Ridge. The rich people called it Junction City. It was a coal mining town. My dad was a coal miner, had 5 boys. I was the 4th born, and he named me after him. And I was like, all my life, I was like, why would you name me Stanley? You could have named your firstborn Stanley. But when you hear Stanley Victor Paskavich, I tease people, I'm like, doesn't that just sound famous?
Hey, in our area, Stanley Musial was a very popular guy. So, quite a gentleman and a leader. So I think it's a great name.
But I grew up there. We had, till I was 14 years old, we had an outhouse. So I was old school, One day my dad looked at me and my brother went out, stuck a nail in the ground, took a stick and made a circle and said, start digging. We're putting in indoor plumbing, so that was, I grew up digging and baling hay. And when I was, before the, me getting a diagnosis and the antipsychotics and all that and closing myself in and not exercising, I used to be 6'4", 220, and I could pick up 600 pounds and walk with it like it was nothing. But anyway, I used to be in the Air Force and people was like, this job sucks. I'm like, let me tell you a job that sucks. Cleaning out an outhouse, you don't get any, But I went to Sandoval High School in Sandoval, Illinois. I took a quarter semester of poetry, and back then the teacher told me at like 17 that I was gifted with poetry. My first introduction was a little booklet that had Harry Graham's Ruthless Rhymes when I was in the 6th grade. They were kind of cute. But I like rhyming in jingles. The way I ended up in the Air Force, my first wife's mother came over one day, and I was a janitor at the high school, and she said, you got to join the military. And I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. My dad was in the Navy, World War II. My brother was in Vietnam. I said, I'll join. So I called an Army recruiter, and he came, and well, that didn't work out so well. He wasn't exactly the example of the type of military I wanted to go into. And I'm not saying the Army is bad. I'm just saying this recruiter probably shouldn't have had that job. So anyway, the next day, and I called an Air Force recruiter, and he came over and he took me and the wife to Sawyer Air Force Base and showed us the base and took us in everything he could take us in, without an ID card. And then he came home and signed me up delayed enlistment. And I went in 16 March of 79, and I got out in September of 91. When I got out, they were doing that grand run, closing the bases and stuff. And I took a $36,000 buyout and said goodbye. And when I was out, I bought some logging equipment and played in the woods for a while up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because I was at KS Sawyer. While I was in, they sent me to Dover, Delaware for the Gulf War. And I didn't know, I had a choice going back to the desert, which I'd been there the year before. I could go to Dover, and I thought, well, at least I'll be in the States. I didn't know that I was going to be the non-commissioned officer in charge of the body handlers. So for 3.5 months, I was in charge of 15 people, and we opened body bags. And I seen all the atrocities of death. I've seen blown up, burn up. I've seen suicides. My first day there, I seen 4 suicides. You know, people shot themselves in the head to come home. And the next day there, I had 4 guys with no heads at all. So, I mean, it just got continually worse. The way this book came around, I had a friend stayed over one night, and his mother called him and told him his best friend had hung himself. You know, and she woke him up at 1:30 in the morning, and I had never seen such a look of terror on a person's face before. And I didn't know at the time, but I knew the person too, because, you know, he was using his real name and I knew his nickname. And the next morning I just started writing poems about, you know, about suicide, you know, and that came up with self-execution being something to replace suicide.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
Stan, I think in our conversations you talked about you had 15 guys working for you, Air Force guys, airmen, I should say, and you had them on a schedule, and then you really showed a lot of leadership, in my opinion and my estimation, because you left the guys go home, and then you stuck around and did whatever it takes. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's kind of what leads into your whole perspective and where you are right now.
They come in at 7 in the morning, and I'd send them home. And it wasn't just airmen, it was Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines. It was all branches. And at the end of the day, at 4, I would get them all in chairs in a circle, and I'd stand in the middle and I'd say, you know, what was good, what was bad, what was messed up today. I'm trying not to drop the F-bomb, because I really use that to accentuate my conversation. It's kind of a military thing.
Yeah,
but
we all understand.
But they you know, they got it out and everything. And then when they left, I'd spend sometimes, you know, when you got 15 people, they can get a lot done in just a short time. But sometimes I'd be there till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, finishing up what they could have done in 20 minutes or so. But I just wanted to, you know, let them leave, you know, the way they came there, you know. And the thing with the people I saw and what I saw, you know, I wanted to send them home to mom and dad the way they left their mom and dad. But
yeah, that had to be a very emotional time for you, because I don't think many of us I don't think few of us could handle that, you know, 3 or 4 months of, you know, just constant body bags coming in. And for all of us, you know, like I was in the Marine Corps, so, you know, I'm familiar with this. And what I saw was that the planes would land, and you guys would offload the flag draped caskets. And that was all pretty sterile, you know, as far as the civilian population is concerned, because they didn't do what you did, because you were really in mortuary services, something like that?
Well, I was in services squadron in the Air Force, and for some reason they have hotel management, you know, billeting and dining halls and linen exchange and dormitories, and for some reason they have mortuary in there, which mortuary should be like a medical field. I mean, they did send me to mortuary training, and all we did was take mannequins out of body bags and, you know, do charts and graphs, and that really didn't set you up for what, you know, I was in for, because, you know, I seen autopsies every day, and I seen a person, an Army CID, you know, that's their special agents or whatever. I watched him digging in a person's head, squeezing his brain between his fingers to get bullet fragments out.
Yeah, that had to be very gruesome, and I really have a lot of respect and admiration for you to be able to go through that. But it really had an effect on your life, because so many of our veterans come back from overseas, and you also spent time in Iraq. You were overseas, and
I was in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, you were in Saudi Arabia, and
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, your book and your writings and your poetry and all that has a lot to do with PTSD and suicides, and you don't like or you don't use the word suicide, you use self-execution. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's basically, that's what it is. Suicide has been around since the year, it's been around 350 years. And it's been glamorized in books and movies and television. And it doesn't give you that knee-jerk reaction, but when you hear self-execution, you think for a second and go, what's that? Oh, wow, that's killing yourself. And it has a higher tone. I mean, as you read through the book, I explain, with the poems and the things that I write. And, on the cover there, it's not big enough for the audience to read, but it says, the suicide prevention came out in 1958 in California. And, they've been around 60 years. So have I. I'll be 60 in December 19th. But they haven't really advanced. Right now the rates are going up higher and higher. But the thing is, you got those statements people throw out. Suicide is a selfish act. No, it's not a selfish act. And then on the book cover says suicide is a permanent answer to a temporary problem. And I say suicide isn't any type of answer. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Suicide isn't any type of solution. And then I come in with my killing yourself is SE, self-execution. And the act will always be greater than the cause. And the thing about that is, when you really get down to it, even if you're around for a couple extra seconds to smile and laugh or make somebody else laugh, it's worth it. I don't care if you're dying from terminal cancer. I had cancer last year, and the VA did 43 radiation treatments for my prostate, and it's all gone. But that's another thing about the VA. A lot of people won't go to the VA because of the rumor mill that I heard, that he heard, that they heard, that, they did this to this guy in the hospital. But you can't name a hospital in the entire country that something didn't go wrong. It's not just VA hospitals, it's everywhere. And on the suicide, you get all these 22s too many groups and wanting donations and stuff. Where do the donations go? And it's not just veterans that commit suicide. The EMTs commit suicide. The firemen, the policemen. Even my first psychologist, he committed suicide. So it's when you get into the book and you read the self-execution poem that's in the book, it pretty much explains the whole scenario. It's like, it's a legacy of, if a dad kills himself, then the son, a lot of times ends up killing himself, son or daughter, but it's like a legacy of pain that doesn't stop. And, the other part, if you do kill yourself, you got to worry about who's going to find you. You may lay for 2 or 3 weeks, and then these EMTs and firemen and policemen have to deal with what you've left behind, which all that does is mess them up. It's like my buddy said on Amazon.com, where the book is, it's terrible links in a chain. And the book is available on KDP, and it's available on Amazon.com as a paperback, but it's on my website, StanleyLand.com, as a free download to the entire world. That's where you read it. And you can tell them a little bit what you found in the book.
Yeah, I download the book free, and it downloaded just immediately right onto my computer. So I just read it on my computer, and it's 45 pages long. So it's not one of these reads where it takes you hours and days and weeks to get through it. Stan says you can read it in 45 minutes. I'm kind of a slow reader, and I had to stop and think about some of it a little bit as I read along, but I read it in about an hour or so. And there were parts of the book that, I really wanted to think about. And I learned so much from Stan's perspective. He has such an excellent perspective and so much wisdom on this subject. And anyway, the book covers all this material, which is really something that a lot of people just don't want to face. And it also has some of his poems in it, and they're very fitting because they help tell the story. And what I want to do is in the very beginning of the book, Stan uses the acronym SOLO, which is Save Our Loved Ones, which is really what this book is all about, saving our loved ones and maybe saving ourselves for our loved ones. But he started out by writing, even as I write this, lives are needlessly being lost all over the world from people killing themselves. My goal is to present suicide as a new way in hopes to reduce the casualties we see and give the people who gain knowledge from this the ability to give strength to others in pain. And I think, Stan, you're just so dedicated to helping people, and you recognize that so many people are in pain because you've experienced it yourself.
You know, and the thing is, I've been on this for over a year, and all the work I'm putting in and everything I'm doing with it, the book is absolutely free on the internet. You know, I'm not trying to make money. Like I've said to you before, a lot of people that write self-help books, they look for that, you know, lamb with a broken leg, and they're the lion, and they're going to make millions on somebody else's pain and suffering. I don't want a dime for this book. I mean, if people do want to buy a copy of it off Amazon and give it to somebody without a computer, some people still do like to hold a book. They're not all, you know, Kindle readers and everything. But, you know, I priced it as about as low as Amazon will let me, you know, and I will get royalties off the book, but I'll, you know, more likely I'll just reinvest them into what I'm doing with the book. Because to me, you know, well, I told you, you know, my wife, she had seen me with a rifle in my mouth one too many times, and she came outside and she looked at me and she goes, "Look, I'm tired of this. I'm missing my television show. Pull the trigger, get help. I'm going back in." And then in my head, I was like, get help? Man, that's a grand idea, because I had never thought about getting help. I just wanted to blow my head off and make the pain go away. So, and, you know, a lot of people, you know, depression, it's, you know, you can't really fight it. You know, your mind goes up against you and it justifies the pain. And I've got like 700 poems. There's probably 400 on my website. And also on my website, anything you find, anybody else finds, if they want to copy it, print it, give it away, sell it, I don't care. I'm not your author, me, mine, you know, I'm going to make a fortune. I'm not worried about making a fortune. I've already left my name on the internet. If you Google Stanley Victor Paskavich, you can find people now that are using my quotes. My phone just talked to me for some reason. It's you can find my quotes that people are putting on other images, but I have my quotes on my own images, and I do them like psychologically. I know what my words mean, and I pick the picture that matches the words. And then I've got a buddy that his name's Matt Hales. He's really good with computers because I'm not good at putting words on pictures, so he puts them together. Coming soon, I'm going to have an entire book with all the memes that we've made in like 12 or 13 years. You know, and they cover bipolar, they cover PTSD. I was telling you about bipolar, you know, my goal.
Yeah, and you were telling me about bipolar, and most people won't even, you know, talk about it, and yet you're very forthcoming about this.
Well, yeah, the doctors are now saying there's like a really strong relationship between mental illness and intelligence. And, you know, there is a famous bipolar list, and about anybody that's on it was very brilliant. Einstein, Newton, Abe Lincoln, Ben Franklin, Robert E. Lee, and then you got music people, everybody, you know, about any brilliant name you could come up with is pretty much on the bipolar list. That's kind of my goal, just to see my name there with those names. But, you know, I'd rather be remembered than rich any day.
And speaking of rich and everything, you say everything you have is free. You know, you have no charge. But you have a web page, and I know I have a web page, and it's expensive to be able to have a web page. You have to pay your annual fees. You have your maintenance of and everything like that. And so, you know, what you say, you get some royalties and you get some money, some income. And I know that's the same way with me, is all that money just gets plowed back into it, and you end up really spending your own money keeping this up. And so you're really providing a wonderful service for everyone. You got a great web page, and you have all those poems on there. And I know I just go around exploring your web page, and I'm just fascinated with it.
Well, you know, the books on the sidebar, the ones that are on Amazon and everything, the ones I'm not telling everybody in the audience to buy my book, because I wrote them for me. I wrote them for my kids. I gave them to my kids, and my kids are all like, I'm like, you got my book? Oh, I moved, I lost them. I tell you, if my dad wrote a book, it'd be going in my coffin with me. But anyway, on those books, as soon as I got them printed and stuff, I've been on, you know, the internet talking with people like 20 years and trying to share my stuff. And I'd meet people across the world. I'm like, would you like to have a free signed copy of my book? And they're like, sure. So I've sent $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of books to people all over the world, you know, because I'm trying to do the remembered part. Have you ever heard of what's called the 6 degrees of separation?
Yeah, I have.
I'm using that. You know, I've sent books to people in England and Ireland and Scotland and Germany and Australia, you know, and sometimes it was just the first one or the second one. Sometimes it was all 6. But, you know, and the thing about it is I sent them so that they could show other people, and then, you know, people could buy the books and show people. But what happens is if I send you a collection of signed books, you put them on the shelf as valued treasures and you don't show them to anybody. And then, and you know, that $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever I spent, that's not counting the postage. I mean, there's a friend of mine that's got a bipolar group in England, and I sent her 5 books, and it was $56 postage on top of, you know, and everybody thinks when you're an author, you get your books for free. You don't get your books for free. You got to pay for your books, but you get them at a discount. But I noticed yours is a hardback.
Yeah, and the reason for that is we self-published. My son really helped me quite a bit, and he's also an Air Force vet of 6.5 years. So what happened was we tried to find a publisher, and he really worked hard at it, and no one would publish my book. They said, well, nobody would have any interest in reading this. You know, they gave me all kinds of excuses. And so we started exploring, you know, self-publishing, and really learned how to do that. And a Marine Corps friend of mine, guy I went through officer's candidate course with, and I was with in the 1st Marine Brigade for 3 years. He started writing novels, and what he did is he self-published on a website called Smashwords, and it was free, and they give you tutorials on how to self-publish and do it, you know, self-publish as an ebook. And they're affiliated with 11 other ebook sites, and then you sell your book on there, and then they get a commission, but they only take a very small part, where the publishing companies take a very big percentage, and the author just gets a small percentage. So then once we learned how to do it, you know, producing an ebook, then we went about learning how to get it printed by a printer as a print book. And I wanted to have a hardcover because I felt like the book was really important to do that. And but I had a little bit different goal. I didn't do it to make money, because this thing has cost me all my savings and into my investments. and if I had to do it over again, I'd do it over again. But I'd probably save myself at least a few $1,000s because I learned some pretty harsh lessons.
Well, I went out with a publisher with my very first book. It was just called Stanislaw. Oh, back to the Stanislaw.
Yeah, tell us about your website and the name and everything.
Back to the Stanislaw.com. My oldest daughter, her name's Nellie Christina Marie Paskavich. But anyway, I went with the 3-name Catholic thing because my mom, grandma, everybody had it. But she was up in Michigan. She came up, because me and her mother had been separated. She was 14. We're sitting there, and I'm giving her my life philosophies, and she goes, "Dad, you live in fantasy land." So when I did my first book, I thought, perfect name for a title. I've on the books on the sidebar, when you look at my website, the art on there is written from a friend of mine. His name's David Labonte. And I can tell him, hey, I want this or I want that. And a lot of them, he already had the images, and I looked, I'm like, that'll work great. But the one called Spaghetti Soup, which is my life story, when I did that Centralia, Illinois radio station, the announcer goes, "This is just like chicken soup for the soul, only dicier." I've told you some of the parts in there. I was so good at my job in the Air Force, I got away with a lot of things most people couldn't have got away with. I had a full-bird colonel in charge of the base. He told me, he said, "If you want, I'll make it, I'll promote you to master sergeant, and you can go to first sergeant school." And I said, "Nope." I said, "Just give the stripe to somebody who can't take a test. I'll make it when I'm ready." Because I was already an E6, and I think I stood around 8 years or 9 years, which was really fast for Air Force. But he said, "Okay." And if I would have went to the first sergeant school, then I wouldn't have went to the mortuary, and none of this would have happened. Like we were talking before about choices and how much it changes.
Yeah, every choice we make as we proceed in life has an impact on where we end up. And I know, for example, a lot of times I regret that I didn't stay in the Marine Corps for a full 20 or 30-year career. But if I would have, a lot of things would have changed for me. I wouldn't have had the work experience I had, and I probably wouldn't be living here right now. I may never have written the book I wrote. So,
Yeah.
Everything depends on choices.
Yeah, and we were talking about, oh, I hate it when I draw a blank because I usually don't draw too many blanks. Oh, one of the poems in the book. In life, it's all about perceptions. How we perceive reality, how we perceive ourselves. One of the poems I will recite, because I do this one for lots of people, but it's called "Emotional Lies." And it goes, "Look deep in the mirror, and you may not see the way your face looks exactly to me. Now that I've said this, what goes through your mind is how I can see you in a different design. When you look at your reflection that's in the mirror, you have emotional eyes showing things that you fear, things that have been ingrained in your brain from a life of emotions that brings your eyes pain. They tell you each day that you're getting old, and never forget the bad things you've been told. Things like you're stupid, fat, or ugly. Emotional eyes are a curse, don't you see? It's hard to overcome these illusions of self. They can hurt your life and hinder your health. I suppose the best thing that you can do is to love yourself and see the real you." And when I recite that to people, I see that one little tear in the corner of their eye. And I'm like, yep, I just rewrote their mind. They will never think they're ugly again.
And for those of you who are watching, when you download the book, this poem is actually on page 4 of the book, so you can read it yourself. And I know I've read it and reread it a couple of times, and after that, you say, "I have several hundred poems and quotes I've written," and I think you've told me you've written more than 400 poems. Actually, you've written a lot more than that. That's how many you have published on your website, I believe.
I've got around 700, I think. Altogether, there's about 400 on my website. And that's not counting my 500 and some individual quotes of my own. We were talking the other day about my energy defines life, not flesh and blood. We are infinite energies experiencing infinity through a finite aperture, which that takes you to a whole nother realm. Because, if energy can't be created or destroyed, then we're always going to be something, So the body is finite, but the essence that runs the body is infinite. Just like the mind, the use of the mind is finite, but the power of the mind is infinite. Everybody's like, "I can't quit smoking. I can't. They need to change that to "I choose not to." because there really aren't any can'ts. It's just, I choose not to. Somebody told me I can't live without a cell phone. I'm like, oh, okay. But
you can live without a cell phone. You just choose not to.
exactly. One of my quotes is the best book I ever read was The Little Engine That Could. That was the best self-help book I ever read. I said, The Little Engine That Could. And it is a great book. Not I think I can, I know I can. And that's the way it is. And the same with this book here. In the book, I say, if you change the mindset, you change the life. And it really is that simple. Just a little bit of a change in the mindset, you know.
So it really is, it's even more than a survivor's guide to self-execution. It's really a survivor's guide to, you know, having a good perspective on how we should live.
Yeah, depression, everything, you know. I mean, do you see Cage the Rage on your monitor there? The poem.
Yeah, that's right after the poem you just read. Yeah, I've got that up here.
Can you read that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's Cage the Rage, and I can write my thoughts in a diary and hide the darkest secrets of my life. But as for some that can't download somewhere their lives so filled with strife, removing the veil of secrecy is hard for us to do. If you can't download your pains, the demons control you. You can try a therapist, a psychiatrist, or a priest, but just a simple diary could be the best at least. Life is never easy, even if you're rich beyond control, but we all have secrets that can tear at each one's soul. Hard times will often happen with pains you can't forget. Understanding this will tell you to find the best outlet. We know from the past, we know how the past can become an endless page and how it can trigger us to feel anger, hurt, and rage. Search deep within to find your one true self and trap your demons in your diary so high upon your shelf. Yeah, that's perfect. Outstanding.
I try to empower people, you know. I mean, because most poets are bleeding heart poets, you know. Oh, my life, and you know, and this and that. But you know, when I write, when you get to the website, like I've told you before, I hate the word told. I've shared with you before. Like, you know, the interview. I'm not talking at you or to you. I'm talking with you. That's what I do in the book. I talk with people. You know, it's not a technical manual. It's just me going, you know, all different topics, related poems. But
yeah, you're having a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I've given it to VA doctors, you know, mental health doctors and stuff, you know, and a lot of people on the internet. And a lot of people have said it's more of a tool than a book. You know, and the thing about it is, if you read it and then you wait and read it in a couple of weeks later, since your life has changed a little bit, your perceptions in the poem, you know, I've had that with my very first book. Everybody's like, every time I read it, I get something different out of it. But
absolutely. Well, Stan, I hope that our viewers will download your book and read it, and I hope it'll help. And we've talked before. You said something that just really meant a lot to me. Is you said, well, if I can just help one person and maybe help one person with their pain, that would be a great thing for yourself. And that's just the way you think. And I have so much admiration and respect for you for that.
Yeah, we're going to have to clarify the spelling of Fantasyland just to make sure they can find it if they want to find it. But it's instead of Fantasyland, you start it with an ST. STANTASYLAND.com. It's pretty simple to, you know, and if you Google Fantasyland and hit, there's a lot of things. If you do Stanley Victor Paskavich and hit images on Google, like I said, there's all kinds of different quote sites putting my quotes on their images. My nephew said, "Why don't you sue them?" I'm like, "Because they're giving me free advertising. They're promoting my work, you know, and my, you know, and words do heal, you know."
Yeah, and you also have a Facebook page, and that's really how I found Stan. So, you know, there's a lot of things that many of us don't like about social media, and a lot of things we don't like about Facebook. But this, you know, if it wouldn't be for Facebook, I wouldn't have met a lot of the friends I have, and I would have never had the opportunity to meet Stan and be able to read his book and get to know him. And so it's been a great thing for me.
Yeah, and I'm on Facebook as my full name. I'm on there, Stanley Victor Paskavich, along with the other 16 Facebook pages that I made. And the reason I did that was because, like I said, I would have a name for a page pop in my head that I thought that would be an interesting page for people to be on. I have one called "God is My Chaperone," and I've been getting a lot of people joining it. The image has like an owl with the moon, with some birds flying in the moon. And my quote on there, because I like to play with words, everybody says I'm a wordsmith, but anyway, my quote on there, my quote on there is, "God's wisdom exceeds infinity." That's pretty deep.
Yeah, for sure.
But to me, since he created infinity, I guess he'd know what's on the other side of it.
Yeah. And so speaking of infinity, I think Stan and I could talk for infinity if we could last that long. But anyway, I guess there's time where we're going to have to wrap things up. And Stan, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the American Vision. Your perspective and your wisdom is just so outstanding, and it was just a pleasure for me to be able to talk with you again.
Well, just like, you know, like everyone I talk with, I put in a plug for the book. I mean, I'll call Verizon, you know, and do my phone bill or whatever, and I'm like, "Oh, by the way, I have a book that's a free download to the world to try to get people to quit killing themselves." And they're like, "Really?" And I give them the website. Whether they go to it or not, I don't know. But if you don't throw it out there, it won't go anyways. It's kind of like they used to say, if you don't ask the question, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, when you tell somebody it's totally free, I'm not trying to make any money with it, then you get their attention that way. Like when I went in, they were fitting me for a wheelchair. I'm gonna have to be using a wheelchair pretty soon. But the lady, I'm like, "Yeah, I wrote a book. It's free download to the world. It's called The Survivor's Guide to Self-Execution." And she's like, "Oh, I don't want to read that," you know, because it does get your attention, and that's the purpose of it. But anyway, she's like, we talked. Went back and talked. Second time, I explained it a little more, and I wrote down my website. She says, "Yeah, I'll definitely read that." But you know, when you first hear it, it sounds like something you want to, you know, like we were talking conflict. You either run with it or run away from it. You know, I even talk about in that book. In the book, there's a lot of things I talk about. You know, on a test question in the Air Force, I learned this. They said an obstacle is something you see when you take your eyes off your goal. I did find out it was Henry Ford that said that, but the Air Force was using it. But anyway, we should probably just wrap this up, and you can go on with your day in Florida. And if you want to do the other books or something or another interview, I have tons of stuff rolling around up here. I mean, yeah.
I know we've had so many conversations, and never really the same thing, and it's always very interesting. So Stan, thank you so much.
Well, you know, the thing is, when someone looks at you and says, "I didn't think of it that way before," you just changed their world.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of this book, is I didn't think of it that way before.
Okay. So thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, boys and girls, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed Stan's interview. What a great story he has, and he's really a genius, and the writings, his poetry and everything is just outstanding. So anyway, download his book and StanleyLand.com. Go to his website, check out his poetry, and it's not poetry like you and I are used to, like we had to read when we were in grammar school or high school or something like that. This is really more real life type poetry. And what I'd also like you to do is get the book, 2020, A Clear Vision for America. I would, read my book, read Stan's book. You need to start reading and keep reading. And remember, what I always say, where there is no vision, the people perish. That's Proverbs 29:18. And so you need to share my vision and learn what my vision is. I think you'll really be surprised. So, and pleasantly surprised too, I hope. So anyway, God bless our active duty personnel, our veterans, and God bless every one of you. God bless America, and God save our America, because we need you now more than ever before.